Hello everyone. My eye is still bugging me. It's like all fuzzy. I don't know why. I'm blaming the weather.
You may smack you a couple times, maybe it'll fall out. You have a fuzzy on your nose. You got it. I could only see it when your head was facing this way, and I was like...
Okay, that guy. There's just shit in my eye. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But one time when we were going to driver's ed, we stopped at Casey's to get breakfast.
That was a long time ago, by the way.
Yeah.
We're no longer in driver's ed.
No. We were what, 14 or 15, and we were taking like a summer course that was only 3 weeks long. And so we stop at Casey's to get breakfast. We're sitting in there and we're eating. And she was talking about something, she just smacks me right in the head, and my contact fell out onto my phone.
It was supposed to be like a pretend playful smack, and I don't have any depth perception, so it wasn't a playful smack.
And then she's just sitting there in like a state of shock, and she was like, oh my god.
And then she's like, my contact fell out. I was like, I hit you that hard. And we're both still traumatized about it.
And also, I got a letter from the Secretary of State and said that I am in the Safe Driver Remote Program.
She couldn't get that out earlier in the car. It took her about 4 minutes.
But there's no segue into this topic from that. But today we are talking about the Manson family cult.
I was gonna say, you know who else was a straight safe driver? Charles Manson.
Was he?
I don't know.
I mean, he was incarcerated half of his life. I don't think he was doing much driving.
So he's pretty safe if he's not driving then.
Just like me, except I'm not a cult leader. And then at the end of the video, we actually have recent information to talk about, so stay tuned for that because it's kind of fucking wild. I mean, I've heard of the Charles Manson cult, but I've never like really dug too deep into it until Carly was like, let's do this. And I was like, oh, that's one that I've never been able to research, so let's do it. So this is literally me like learning about it for the first time. It's pretty whack. So Charles Manson, cult leader, his followers were known as the family. So it's not his actual family. For someone who doesn't know like what the cult's about, they would think like the Manson family cult is like their whole family. No, it's just
they're all fucking nuts. The whole family.
That's what the followers were known as. So they called themselves the family, kind of like how Heaven's Gate, they called themselves the crew. And this whole thing was a commune, a gang, and a cult. So it had a whole lot of bad stuff going in it all at the same time. And this cult was active in California from the late 1960s to the early 1970s. So it didn't last too long. It probably could have gone on a lot longer, but thankfully it didn't. Because some bad things were going down.
They probably could have kept it going, but thank God they didn't.
That's all I gotta say. It consisted of exactly 100 members. I don't know if there was like a reason for that or if they just stopped at 100. I don't know. Members used benzodrine, which is a psychoactive drug, and they used LSD. They were tripping.
As they did in the 70s.
Yeah, this takes place in the 70s. Like the whole hippie movement was really going into action. I don't know what to say.
Hippies in action.
But this was like the psychedelic movement, like especially in California at the time. And most of the members were young women who came from middle-class backgrounds. And they were attracted by the hippie culture and communal living. And if you don't know what a commune is, it's when you all live together on the same property. You could have, basically it's like one big piece of land and there could be other houses on there. Like people could live in separate houses, but they all lived on this property together.
My dad used to live on a commune.
Like the Jonestown Massacre, they lived in a massive commune out in frickin' Ghana. Like it's very common among cult leaders to do that. Like they take their followers to this property and say you can live here on this land in your own home, but you have to stay on this property with us. And in that time, communal living was pretty popular with the hippie movement. It was like a 2-for-1 deal for him. He got what he wanted.
Charles Manson was born in 1934. He had been institutionalized and incarcerated for more than half of his life by the time he was released from prison in 1967. He began getting followers in the San Francisco area. Members of the family were convinced that Charles was a manifestation of Jesus Christ and believed in his prophecies about an imminent apocalyptic race war. He wanted to start a race war that would make white people see how dangerous black people were.
I don't know what's up with these cult leaders believing that they are Jesus. I don't know, man. Why do they gotta bring Jesus into it? I got no clue. But this man seemed kind of racist.
A little. Maybe just
a little. But also, I didn't look up much of his like early life just because it said he spent most of his life up until that point institutionalized and incarcerated, so I can only imagine the things that he was doing. And that all leads into the cult beginning. Spooky. Manson was released from prison on March 22nd, 1967. He moved to San Francisco and got an apartment in Berkeley. He ended up getting help from one of his old prison mates or something. He lived mostly by begging on the streets. That's how he made his money, because he didn't have a job. He became acquainted with Mary Brunner. She was 23 years old and she was a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She was working as a library assistant at the University of California. And Manson ended up moving in with her. That was probably the first mistake. He wanted to bring other women into her apartment and she was like, I don't know about that. I'm not too sure. And he eventually won the battle and 18 other women moved into her apartment.
Sounds like a great time.
So he was really trying to get that communal living going on right off the bat.
I hope it wasn't like a studio.
Yeah,
apartment.
I know. He made himself a guru in the Haight-Ashbury area, which is where a lot of hippies were being drawn to, so he was becoming pretty popular in that area. He borrowed his philosophy from the Process Church of the Final Judgment. And basically that means that they believed that Satan would reconcile with Jesus and the two of them, they would come together at the end of the world and there they would judge humanity together.
I'm at a loss.
And with those philosophies, he soon had his first followers and they were all female. He taught his followers that they were the reincarnation of the original Christians and that the establishment could be characterized as the Romans. I don't know what that means. I have no idea.
No follow-up questions.
In 1967, later that year, Brunner ended up getting pregnant by Manson. Yikes. On April 15th, 1968, she gave birth to their son, Valentine Michael. She ended up giving birth to him in a condemned house in Topanga Canyon. The other women that were living with them at the time basically played the roles as doctors. That would be absolutely terrifying to give birth and have a bunch of women, like not even have a doctor there. Like I don't know what the backgrounds of those women were, but I'm already scared to give birth as it is. I ain't gonna have no kids. I don't want no damn kids. Fuck them kids.
The Dennis Wilson involvement. In the spring of 1968, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys picked up Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey on the side of the road. They were hitchhiking while drunk and on LSD. He drove them to his Pacific Palisades house for a few hours. The following morning, Wilson came home from a night recording session and found Manson in his driveway, who had come out of his house.
Just imagine that, like, you get home after, like, being in the studio all night recording songs and you get back and you just see a random fucking dude come out of your house and standing in your driveway.
Hello? He asked Manson if he was planning to hurt him. Manson said he had no intent of hurting him and started kissing Wilson's feet.
Why?
Sir?
Why? I get that drugs make you do strange things, but what the heck?
Wilson went inside and found 12 strangers, mainly women. Over the next few months, the number of women doubled in Wilson's house. At least it's not a tiny apartment, I guess.
Yeah.
He covered all of their costs, which was $100,000. There was a large medical bill for treatment of gonorrhea. That's nice.
That's nice. Just your reaction. That's nice.
Wilson and Manson would talk and sing and treated the women like servants. He introduced Manson to business acquaintances Greg Jacobson, Terry Melcher, and Rudy Altabelli. Altabelli owned a house which he rented to Sharon Tate and husband Roman Polanski. Wilson moved out of his house when the lease was up. The landlord evicted the family.
So they ended up staying in the house, even after Wilson left, and then the landlord was like, y'all gotta get out. Y'all ain't paying rent.
Can you
guys go somewhere else, please? And with them getting evicted and they had nowhere to go, they went to a new place called the Spawn Ranch. I think I'm saying that right. It's S-P-A-H-N. So Spawn. Spawn. Spawn.
I think it would be Spawn. Spawn. Such a weird name, though.
I know. In August 1968, Manson created a little base for his family called the Spawn Ranch. It was actually a TV and movie set made for westerns, but it had been abandoned and left to deteriorate. They made money on the ranch primarily from selling horseback rides. I don't know. I don't know why. What the heck?
People like to ride horses.
I wonder if anyone legitimately went there and didn't realize that they were getting a horseback ride from a cult. So that's weird. I don't know. Female members, they would do chores around the house because, you know, he treated them like servants, so I guess that's what they were supposed to be to him. And then they bring in George Spawn. He is the owner of Spawn Ranch, and to be able to live there, let me back up. He was an 80-year-old man, almost totally blind. So George was like, yeah, y'all can live here if you let me have sex with your women. So Manson was like, yeah. So Manson would give orders to the women to sleep with this man in order for them to live there.
I wonder if he got gonorrhea.
And the women were also acting as his guides around the house since he was blind, so they helped him out a lot. In September 1970, the ranch actually ended up burning down from a California wildfire. Burn away that sin.
On March 23rd, 1969, Manson went to 150 CeeLo Drive. It was known to him as Melcher's residence. He wasn't invited. Shocking, honestly. Approaching the main house, he was met by Sharak Hatami, an Iranian photographer who was friends with Tate and Polanski. He was there to photograph Tate before she left for Rome the next day. Hatami went to the front porch to ask him what he wanted. He said he was looking for somebody that Hatami didn't know, and he said this is the Polanski residence and to try the guest house through the back alley. Tate came to the door to see who was there, and Hatami said a man was looking for somebody. They stayed on the porch while Manson went to the guest house. After a few minutes, he came back to the front and said nothing and left.
Creepy!
See you later, I guess. That evening, Manson came back and went to the guest house. He went to the porch and talked to the owner, Altabelli. Manson asked for Melcher, but Altabelli thought he was looking for him. He said Melcher moved to Malibu and he didn't have a new address. He did. Shocking. They had already met last year at Wilson's. Altabelli said he was leaving the country the next day for a year. Manson said he would like to speak with him when he got back. Altabelli told him not to disturb the tenants. The next day, Altabelli and Tate flew to Rome. Tate asked him if the creepy-looking guy went to the guest house to talk to him.
And after that encounter is when some crimes started. Are we surprised? No. Are we going to hear about them? Yes.
Also no. That's the end of the video.
Tex Watson, a member, he ended up getting involved in dealing drugs. He robbed a drug dealer, Bernard Crow, very popular drug dealer. Crow allegedly retaliated. He threatened to kill everyone at the Spawn Ranch. On July 1st, 1969, Manson shot Crow at his Hollywood apartment. And this is where it kind of got weird, because the whole thing with the Mansons is that my battery's gonna die. One moment. And the whole thing about the Manson cult is that Charles Manson never actually killed anyone. That's what everyone says.
We had a very long conversation about this.
Yeah. A couple articles made it sound like Charles Manson did kill Crow, but he didn't. And we find that out later. But it's very important to know that Charles Manson did not kill anybody. But Manson 100% thought that he did kill Crow because he saw on the news that there was a dumped body of a Black Panther member, and Black Panther is a gang. But as it turns out, Crow was not a member of the Black Panthers. Manson didn't know that. So, uh-oh. And Crow actually ended up testifying at one of the trials because they were trying to get Manson convicted of murder, but he didn't actually murder anybody. But Crow came in and was like, this is what he's capable of, though. He is capable of murdering somebody, he just never did. So if you let him keep roaming around, he's going to end up actually murdering somebody. But he didn't. And with Manson not knowing that Crow was not a member of the Black Panthers, and that Crow was even still alive, Manson thought that the Black Panthers were going to end up coming after him. Which, you know, valid. He ended up turning the Spawn Ranch into a whole defense camp. He had night guards that would patrol the area. They were armed and they were ready. Tex later said Blackie was trying to get at the chosen ones. They're freaking whack. Manson brought members of the Straight Satan's motorcycle club in to literally be his bodyguards and to protect what was his, which was the Spawn Ranch.
The Hinman murder. Gary Allen Hinman was a music teacher and a PhD student at UCLA. He was born December 24th, 1934 in Colorado. In the late 1960s, unsure of the exact point, he became friends with members of the family and would occasionally allow some of the women to stay at his house. Manson believed that he was wealthy. On July 25th, 1969, Manson sent Bobby Beausoleil, Mary Brunner, and Atkins to Hinman's house to convince him to join the family and to turn over his assets that Manson thought he had. Hinman denied having any money, and the three members held him hostage for 2 days. Manson showed up with a sword and slashed Hinman's face and ear. Beausoleil stabbed Hinman to death, allegedly on Manson's instructions. Before leaving, somebody used Hinman's blood to write "Political Piggy" on the wall and drew a panther paw, Black Panther symbol. Beausoleil was arrested on August 16th, 1969, after he was caught driving Hinman's car. The police found the murder weapon in the tire well.
Like, just imagine you make some friends and you let them stay at your house and then you don't have money and they accuse you of having money and lying, so they kill you. And that didn't stop there. There were some later August murders after that. At night, on August 8th, 1969, Manson directed Tex Watson to take Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel to Melcher's former home, which was the place that he went to previously, and people were sketched out by it. Manson's instructions were, kill everyone there. I don't know why.
I don't have any answers.
The house was recently rented to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. At this point, Polanski was in Europe for business. They killed 5 people: Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, I don't even know how to say this, Wojceich. I don't know how to say that name. Last name is Frykowski, and Stephen Parent. Atkins wrote "pig" on Sharon Tate's front door, so it kind of looks like they're trying to frame the Black Panthers, leaving like their mark, like their symbols, so then it would cover up the fact that it wasn't Charles Manson and his people.
I remember watching the documentary that came out a long time ago when I was a kid, and I watched it with my dad, and I can like specifically remember them showing the crime scene photos of where they wrote "pig" on the door or the wall.
The wall. Well, one was on the door.
I was gonna say, well, I thought it was on like one of the doors. They wrote "pig" in blood, like really big.
And this whole thing created a nationwide sensation because, you know, Sharon Tate, a very popular actress, and the fact that she got murdered while she was 8.5 months pregnant, like, Roman Polanski's over in Europe. People are like, what the hell? Because this doesn't happen in the 1960s.
Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. On August 9th, 1969, 7 family members drove to Leno and Rosemary LaBianca's house. The 4 from the previous night and Leslie Van Houten, Steve Grogan, and Charles Manson. 2 men went into the house through the unlocked back door. Watson, who showed up later, bound the couple and covered their heads with pillowcases. He sent the women into the bedroom where Rosemary was. He started stabbing Leno with a bayonet in the living room. For what reason?
What even is a bayonet?
Isn't that the gun that's got a knife on the end of it?
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure it is. That's such a strange thing to...
A dagger-like steel weapon that is attached to or at the muzzle of a gun. Why would you be walking around with that?
I don't know.
Like, just use a knife, bro. Also, who leaves their back door unlocked at night? Like, I get that this was back in the 60s and 70s.
I don't think anybody locked their door then.
Really?
Even when I was a kid, my dad never locked the door.
That is so sketch.
Like, nobody ever did.
Literally.
It wasn't a thing that you did.
And then today, it's like, if you unlock your door, you're gonna get killed in your sleep.
He went to the bedroom and saw Rosemary swinging a lamp at the women.
Imagine pillowcase over the head just swinging a lamp.
Grab the closest thing to you, I guess. He stabbed her with the bayonet, and then he went back to the living room and stabbed Leno 12 more times. Krenwinkel stabbed Rosemary. Watson told Van Houten to stab her, so she did. Krenwinkel wrote "Rise" and "Death to Pigs" on the walls and "Helter Skelter" on the fridge door with La Bianca's blood. That's another thing that I like very specifically remember from the documentary. And there's also there's a Beatles song called "Helter Skelter."
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that like plays into thinking that Charles Manson did it because he was trying to like get record deals and stuff apparently. Like he was trying to get into the music industry and he just sucked. And he had a lot of failed record deals. And so he might have had like some anger and told them to write that. I don't know like the reason.
He's a weird man.
Yeah.
Manson had Kasabian drive to the location of a friend of hers, but she gave the wrong address to avoid a murder.
There was the Shea murder. Shea was a Spawn Ranch stuntman and a horse wrangler. So he was like at the ranch all the time. He was killed 10 days after a sheriff raid on the ranch. It happened on August 16th, 1969. And this is kind of when everything just really started falling apart. Manson thought that Shea was part of the raid. Like he helped, it was a bug. He helped bring the sheriff's department there and was the reason for it. Manson was not having that. So I found this article. It says, around the end of August 1969, Charles Tex Watson, Bruce Davis, Steve Grogan, Bill Vance, Larry Bailey, and Charles Manson grabbed Shea and forced him into their car. Shoved into the back seat, Shea had no quick escape. Grogan was first to attack and Tex quickly joined in. While Grogan hit Shea over the head with a pipe wrench, Tex stabbed Shea repeatedly. Somehow Shea managed to stay alive and was alert when the group pulled him from the car and dragged him down a hill behind Spawn Ranch, where they then stabbed him to death. It wasn't until December 1977 that Shea's body was found. Steve Grogan was in prison when he drew a map of where Shea's body had been buried and gave it to the authorities. His motivation was to prove that, contrary to rumors, Donald Shea had not been cut into 9 pieces and buried. Grogan was later paroled and the only Manson family member convicted of a murder that has ever been paroled.
Oh, that's crazy. The investigation. On August 9th, 1969, the Tate members became national news. Winifred Chapman and the Polanski housekeeper found the murder scene when she showed up for work that morning.
Just imagine that, showing up to work and everyone's murdered.
You're just like,
okay.
Gotta
call the cops.
Like, I don't get paid enough for this. On August 10th, detectives of LA County Sheriff's Department told LAPD they believed that there were similarities between the Tate and Hinman crime scenes. It went ignored until autopsy showed similarities in the weapons used, the stab wounds, and the blood writing on the walls. They believed it had something to do with narcotics. On August 10th at 10:30 p.m., the La Bianca crime scene was found by Frank Struthers, Rosemary's 15-year-old son from a previous marriage. He noticed all the window shades were down and his stepdad's speedboat was still attached to the car. He called his older sister and her boyfriend. The boyfriend, Joe Dorgan, went into the home with him and found Leno's body. They called the police, who found Rosemary's body. The raid from August 16th resulted in Manson and 25 others getting arrested. The search warrant was misdated, so they were released a few days later.
Damn! Yeah, just imagine that. Like, the search warrant was misdated, so you had to let them all go.
On December 1st, 1969, LAPD announced warrants for Watson, Krenwinkel, and Caspian.
Watson and Krenwinkel were already being arrested in McKinney, Texas, and Mobile, Alabama. And a highway patrol officer found Manson hiding in a cabinet beneath Barker's bathroom sink during a ranch raid. A mate of Susan Atkins told LAPD of the family's involvement in the crimes. Atkins was arrested for the Hinman murder after she told them she participated in it. And on December 2nd, Kasabian voluntarily surrendered to the police in Concord, New Hampshire. So they were all in like different parts and they were like, fuck. And with all of them being arrested, then the trial started. On June 15th, 1970, the trial began for Kasabian, Mason, Atkins, and Krenwinkel. They were all charged with 7 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy. And this, I found this kind of funny. Kasabian was granted immunity in exchange for testimony that detailed the nights of the crimes since she didn't participate in the killings. And she was like, oh hell yeah, I'm getting immunity, I'm gonna do that. Originally, the deal was made with Atkins where the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty against her in exchange for her grand jury testimony. And Atkins was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do that. And once Atkins repudiated that testimony, their deal withdrawn, they took it away. And I was like, well, Van Houten was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 of conspiracy for only participating in the La Bianca killings. Originally, Manson was going to act as his own attorney. That doesn't seem very smart, but he violated a gag order, so then his want to do that got taken away, and they were like, nope, you can't do that anymore. But that got withdrawn before the trial even started. On Friday, July 24th, Manson appeared in court with an X carved into his forehead.
I can't stand you. Not you, him.
He stated that he was considered inadequate and incompetent to speak or defend himself and had X'd himself from the world.
That's how that works.
Over the following weekends, the females did the same thing. When the females did it, most of the other members followed. They decided to X themselves from the world. That's not how court works. I'm just letting you guys know. I've never been to court, but even I know that that's not how that works. And I found this, and it says, the prosecution argued the triggering of Helter Skelter was Manson's main motive. The crime scene's bloody White Album reference, Helter Skelter, written by Susan Atkins, and the writing of pigs was correlated with testimony about Manson's predictions that the murders black people would commit at the outset of Helter Skelter would involve the writing of pigs on the walls in the victim's blood. The defendants testified that the writing in blood on the walls was to copy that of the Hinman murder scene, not an apocalyptic race war. During the trial, family members loitered near the entrances and corridors of the courthouse. To keep them out of the courtroom proper, the prosecution subpoenaed them as prospective witnesses who would not be able to enter while others were testifying. When the group established itself in vigil on the sidewalk, some members wore sheathed hunting knives. They were all carried legally, and each of them also... And they all had an X on their forehead, too. Why?
Because they're a bit stupid.
Some family members attempted to dissuade witnesses from testifying. Prosecution witnesses Paul Watkins and Juan Flynn were both threatened. Watkins was badly burned in a suspicious fire in his van. Former family member Barbara Hoyt, who had overheard Susan Atkins describing the Tate murders to family member Ruth Ann Morehouse, agreed to accompany the latter to Hawaii. There, Morehouse allegedly gave her a hamburger spiked with several doses of LSD, found sprawled on a Honolulu curb in a drugged semi-stupor. Hoyt was taken to the hospital where she did her best to identify herself as a witness in the Tate La Bianca murder trial. Before the incident, Hoyt had been a reluctant witness. After the attempt to silence her, her reticence disappeared. So they're like purposely trying to get people away to not be able to testify. And also they were allegedly accused of a lot more murders but we only covered the official 9 that they did commit, but they were suspected of a lot more shit. And if you want to go online and look at all of that, there's a lot that they are suspected of doing, but it was never actually proven, and I wouldn't put it past them. On August 4th, despite precautions taken by the court, Manson flashed the jury a Los Angeles Times front page whose headline was, "Manson guilty, Nixon declares." This was a reference statement made the previous day when U.S. President Richard Nixon had decried what he saw as the media's glamorization of Manson. The next day, the female defendants stood up and said in unison that in light of Nixon's remark, there was no point in going on with the trial.
That's how court works. You just say, yeah, I don't think we need to do this anymore. And then they're like, yeah, I think you're right.
And then on October 5th, Manson was denied the court's permission to question a prosecution witness whom defense attorneys had declined to cross-examine. Leaping over the defense table, Manson attempted to attack the judge. He was removed from the courtroom with the female defendants, who had subsequently risen and began chanting in Latin.
Nice. Oh, just take the L, buddy.
And he just did a bunch of stuff to make the trial go on and be as unnecessary as humanly possible to try to get out of it.
It didn't work.
Obviously not. And
the conviction. On January 25th, 1971, the jury returned guilty verdicts against the 4 defendants. Midway through the penalty phase, Manson shaved his head and trimmed his beard to a fork.
Well, why did he get... where did he get clippers from?
Maybe they were more lenient back then? I don't know. It seems like a bad idea. Maybe he did trim it with a fork. And he said, "I am the devil, and the devil always has a bald head." In case you didn't know, that's how that works, I guess. The females refrained from shaving their heads until the jurors went to weigh the request for the death penalty.
And they were like, oh no.
On March 29th, 1971, the jury returned verdicts of death against all 4 of them. On April 19th, 1971, they were sentenced to death. In February of 1972, the death sentences were reduced to life in prison because California got rid of the death penalty.
They'd all be dead right now.
Yeah, they cut that real close. They got real lucky. Manson remained in prison until he died of a heart attack and complications from colon cancer on November 19th, 2017. He was 83 years old, and Leslie Van Houten was released on parole on July 11th, 2023.
And also, we were giggling about this the other night. We were looking at all of the people who went to prison. They all had like so many chances to be paroled, and the California governor said no.
Every time.
Every time. Like one person went before a judge like 23 times, and the judge was like, yeah, you can go out on parole, and the governor stepped in and was like,
no.
Overturned. You're done. You're staying in there. And
I bet every time he was like, I said no.
Probably was already getting so irritated. But with Van Houten, they were like, the judge was finally like, or the governor was like, I can't keep doing this. Like,
just go. Get out of my sight.
And they were like, well, she's a changed person. She's been in prison all of these years. She's changed her life around and all of this. And she actually did an interview on like the Today Show. So that's crazy. And she also didn't actually murder anybody. She was just there when it happened. So she still got charged with murder even though she didn't actually kill anybody. Just like how Manson didn't kill anybody, but he got cancer and died, so.
But he died, so.
Sorry about you. But that was the Manson family cult. That was wild. And if you like that, like and comment and subscribe. I have a whole playlist of cults that we've done, so if this is a topic that you like, we got a plethora for you. So head on over to the playlist called Cults and check those out.